what if um, what if the blueprint to saving modern American conservatism wasn't actually found in some Washington think tank, but in like 7th century Islamic law?
Yeah, it's quite a hook, right? Today, we are looking at a radical proposition that completely flips the script on how we view the intersection of faith, politics, and, well, the future of the United States.
Exactly. And it's a premise that challenges almost every mainstream assumption we have about where the country is heading, and more importantly, what tool set is actually required to fix it.
Right, because we're looking at a national landscape that feels increasingly murky to a lot of people. And the author we're studying today argues that conventional political mechanics are completely useless here.
Which is exactly why we are here today. Welcome to the deep dive. For you, the listener who, loves peeling back the layers of complex ideas, we have a truly fascinating mission today.
You really do.
We are unpacking a collection of writings by an author named William, or Halim Breiannis. He's laid out this incredibly unique synthesis of American constitutional conservatism and Islamic theology.
He's basically exploring how he believes America can cure its current cultural and political decline.
But before we go any further, we need to speak directly to you about the nature of this text.
Yeah, this is crucial. The source materials we're diving into today contain some highly charged political and religious viewpoints.
Very charged.
They critique both the left and the right sides of the modern spectrum, alongside some really deep theological claims.
So we must make it absolutely clear right now that we are not taking sides here.
Not at all.
We are not endorsing any of the viewpoints, the theology, or the political stances presented by the author. Our sole mission today is to act as your impartial guides.
Right, we're dissecting the text, not adopting it.
We are just here to objectively break down his arguments, explore the logic behind them, and feed your intellectual curiosity.
Yeah.
Nothing more, nothing less.
Exactly.
Okay, let's unpack this. Here is our roadmap for the deep dive. We're going to start with the author's core diagnosis of America's decline.
Then we'll examine his philosophical proofs for God and his interpretation of constitutional history.
From there, we will see how he bridges American ideals with Islamic principles.
And finally, we'll detail his ultimate political philosophy, which he calls Islamic Constitutionalism.
So let's start with the diagnosis. Breiannis paints a rather, a pretty bleak picture of where the nation stands right now.
He really does. He argues that America is experiencing this fundamental metaphysical and political collapse.
Yeah.
He visualizes modern society as this terrifying hybrid of Aldous Huxley's Brave New World and George Orwell's 1984.
Oh, wow. So the surveillance state of Orwell mixed with the blissful, distracted, medicated compliance of Huxley.
Precisely. You usually hear people pick one or the other to describe modern dystopias.
Right, like we're either being watched or we're being entertained to death.
But combining them paints a picture of a population that is being watched constantly, but is just, too entertained to actually care.
And he points to very specific legislative and cultural symptoms of this disease, doesn't he?
He does. He calls out the Patriot Act and the National Defense Authorization Act.
Specifically, the provisions allowing for indefinite detention.
Yes. And he highlights endless undeclared wars, the massive expansion of the federal government, and critically, the breakdown of the family unit.
So in his view, the federal government has completely usurped the sovereignty that was supposed to belong to the states and the citizens.
Exactly. The people are divided, manipulated, and slowly trading their inalienable rights for temporary government privileges.
So if the American operating system is riddled with that many catastrophic viruses, what does he actually suggest?
Well,
Because usually when someone outlines systemic collapse of this magnitude, their solution is either like a complete teardown revolution or a massive campaign to just vote harder in the next election.
right, but he explicitly rejects both of those pathways. He labels the revolutionary or amendatory path as top-down change.
Which he thinks is impossible.
Pretty much. Trying to pass a sweeping constitutional amendment is practically impossible in today's polarized climate, and relying on the outcomes of a civil or kinetic war is something he strictly and morally opposes.
Yeah, he makes it very clear in the text that he is definitively against any kind of armed conflict or violence.
Then he evaluates what he calls lateral change.
It's the vote harder approach.
Yeah, trying to work within the current two-party political machine. But Breiannis argues that using a broken system to change the system only reinforces the status quo.
Because the institutional propaganda is too thick.
Exactly. The political machine simply absorbs you. He basically says you don't fix a corrupt machine by volunteering to become a cog inside it.
Makes it.
Therefore, he advocates entirely for a bottom-up approach.
A bottom-up approach. It's like realizing that downloading a software update isn't going to fix a computer with a rotted motherboard. You have to build an entirely new operating system from scratch using different code.
That's a great way to put it.
But wait, is he saying we just abandon the national political machine entirely? Does he want people to just walk away and start separatist compounds in the woods?
No, not at all. He is not advocating for secession or isolation. Instead, he points to communities like the Amish or Orthodox Jewish neighborhoods as a foundational model.
Oh, interesting.
Those groups form semi-autonomous local networks based on deep faith and cultural heritage. They govern themselves morally and socially while largely bypassing federal bloat.
But Breiannis introduces a massive twist to that model.
He does. His proposed communities must be explicitly inclusive, not isolated.
Meaning they aren't hiding from the world, they are actively engaging with it.
Right. They're built in the open where the general public can interact with them, do business with them, and witness the positive effects of their social cohesion.
So the strategy is that as these local communities thrive independently, they begin to network together across the country.
Yes. Over time, that organic, ground-level network builds undeniable political clout at the state and national levels simply through demographic and economic gravity.
It is organic growth rather than top-down enforcement. But reading through the text, it becomes clear that he believes none of this community building can survive without addressing the root cause of the societal rot.
The metaphysical code.
Exactly. He claims the political software is corrupted because the metaphysical code is broken. He argues America is losing its soul because it has abandoned its core identity, specifically the national motto, "In God We Trust."
Yeah, he diagnoses the modern materialist worldview.
The idea that humans are just biological accidents floating in a random, indifferent universe.
Right. He sees that as the ultimate source of our crisis of meaning. If there is no purpose maker, there is no definitive right or wrong.
Morality just becomes a matter of popular vote or whoever has the most power.
Exactly. And to back this up, he dives into this fascinating historical and constitutional argument regarding the separation of church and state.
Which is a phrase that everyone assumes is in the Constitution, but it actually isn't.
No, it's not.
It comes from Thomas Jefferson's 1802 letter to the Danbury Baptists.
Right. The Danbury Baptists were a religious minority in Connecticut who were terrified that the state government was going to persecute them or force a specific denomination upon them.
So Jefferson wrote back to reassure them.
He used the phrase, a wall of separation between church and state. Breiannis argues that this wall, alongside the First Amendment's Establishment Clause, was designed entirely to protect religion from government interference.
It was a shield for faith, not a weapon to banish faith from the public square.
He reinforces this by quoting the 1776 Virginia Statute for Religious Freedom, drafted by Jefferson himself, which begins by stating that Almighty God created the mind free.
So early Americans believed religious freedom was an inherent, unalienable right, precisely because it was granted by a divine creator, not by a king or a parliament.
Right. So the foundation of freedom, in his view, requires an active acknowledgement of a creator.
Which means Breiannis has to do something incredibly difficult here. He has to prove that God exists to a highly secularized, modern audience.
But he doesn't use scripture to do it.
No, he uses pure reason, leaning heavily into three pillars: science, math, and physics.
This is perhaps the most philosophically dense section of his work. He starts with science and the foundational concepts of structure, function, and cause and effect.
He takes direct aim at the materialist idea of an eternal, uncaused, random universe by deploying the concept of infinite regress.
Yeah.
I love the visual he uses for this, the House of Mirrors.
That's a great analogy.
He asks the reader to imagine standing in a room of mirrors reflecting a beautiful red rose infinitely in every direction. Even if you can see a billion reflections stretching into eternity, your mind inherently knows that a reflection cannot create itself.
Right.
There has to be an original physical red rose somewhere outside those mirrors that started the entire chain.
Because a series of contingent, dependent things cannot exist without a non-contingent, independent first cause. A zero reflecting a zero is still a zero.
You need a one to give the entire sequence any actual value.
Exactly. And he extends this logic of cause and effect into the realm of function, pointing out that everything in the observable universe serves a specific purpose, suggesting intelligent design rather than random chaos.
He illustrates that with a genuinely funny story about an acorn and a watermelon.
Oh, yeah, that part is great.
He describes a young man sitting under a massive oak tree, looking at a watermelon patch on the ground. The man starts questioning the wisdom of God, thinking, why would a wise creator put a massive, heavy watermelon on a fragile, creeping vine on the ground, but put a tiny, lightweight acorn on a massive, towering oak tree?
And the moment he thinks this, an acorn falls from the branches and hits him right on the head.
Yeah, and the man quickly realizes that if a watermelon had been hanging up there, he would be dead.
It is a really lighthearted way to introduce the concept of functional design.
But here's where it gets really interesting. To prove the physics side of his argument, he doesn't quote a theologian.
No, he doesn't.
He quotes Stephen Hawking, the world-famous avowed atheist physicist. Using an atheist to prove the existence of an uncaused causer and a supreme lawmaker is a wild rhetorical move. How does he pull that off?
He turns Hawking's own observations into a proof of design. He references Hawking's seminal book, A Brief History of Time, where Hawking discusses the fundamental numbers and constants that govern the laws of science.
Things like the exact size of the electric charge of an electron.
Or the precise rate of the universe's expansion. Hawking admits that these numbers seem to be meticulously, finely adjusted to make the development of life possible.
Oh, right.
If these constants were altered by even a fraction of a percent, the universe would either collapse in on itself or expand too fast for stars and planets to form. We simply wouldn't be here.
So if the universe is the house of mirrors, Hawking's fine-tuning observation is basically the realization that the mirrors are angled with such impossible mathematical precision that it couldn't have happened by chance.
Breiannis uses this, what physicists call the anthropic principle, to argue that these exact mathematical constants point objectively to a grand designer.
He argues that because these unbending laws of physics govern matter, they had to exist before matter itself existed.
And if laws exist before the physical universe, logic dictates there must be a lawmaker who established them.
So he uses rational deduction to establish a creator who is singular, uncaused, living, all-knowing, and all-powerful.
Exactly.
Okay, but proving a creator exists is only half the battle. The author now faces a massive hurdle.
A huge one.
How does he convince an American conservative base that the framework to save their nation actually lies in Islamic theology? I mean, the mainstream narrative for decades has insisted that Islam and Western values are fundamentally engaged in a clash of civilizations.
He tackles that clash of civilizations narrative head-on, arguing that it is largely manufactured propaganda designed to sow division.
Interesting.
To dismantle it, he maps the core tenets of American liberty directly onto the structural framework of Islamic law.
Okay, let's look at Thomas Jefferson's Declaration of Independence, which famously cites unalienable rights endowed by the Creator, specifically life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
Right, and Breiannis lines this up seamlessly with the Maqasid al-Sharia, which translates to the higher objectives of Islamic law. The Sharia is designed specifically to protect 7 inherent human rights.
Those 7 rights being faith, life, intellect, honor, lineage, wealth, and property.
Yes.
It reads almost like a more granular, detailed version of Jefferson's concept. But wait, one thing stands out to me. Liberty itself is listed among those 7 Islamic rights.
That's a great observation. It isn't listed because in Islamic jurisprudential thought, liberty is not considered a granted right that needs to be listed alongside property or wealth.
So what is it?
Liberty is the baseline natural state of a human being.
Oh, it's like how you don't list breathing oxygen as a job perk on a resume. It's just assumed.
Exactly. Islamic law views free agency as the oxygen of human existence.
He also draws a direct parallel between the First Amendment's guarantee of religious freedom and specific verses in the Quran, doesn't he?
He does. He cites chapter 2, verse 256, which explicitly commands there is no compulsion in religion.
Which directly challenges the deeply ingrained historical narrative that Islam was exclusively spread by the sword.
And he brings historical receipts to debunk that.
Yeah.
He points out that after Muslims arrived in Syria, which eventually became the very seat of the Islamic Caliphate, it actually took 400 years for the region to reach a Muslim majority.
400 years.
Yes. In Egypt, it took 200 years. If the religion was being forced upon populations under threat of death, those transitions would have happened overnight.
Right, obviously.
Instead, the Islamic legal framework actually protected the religious freedom and property rights of the local Christian and Jewish populations, allowing them to coexist and practice freely.
And the historical receipts he brings regarding American history are equally fascinating.
Oh, they really are.
When you look at the founding of the country, the very first nation to formally recognize the independence of the United States was a Muslim nation, Morocco.
That was the Treaty of Peace and Friendship, signed in 1786.
And he goes on to name specific Muslim soldiers who literally fought and bled for American independence in the Revolutionary War.
Men like Yusuf Ben Ali, who fought alongside General Thomas Sumter in South Carolina.
And Bambit Muhammad, who served in the Virginia line.
He even documents Muslims fighting to preserve the Union during the Civil War. He's demonstrating that Islamic presence isn't an invasive foreign element. It has been woven into the fabric of the American project from its inception.
It's like he is laying out two different architectural blueprints on a table. The U.S. Constitution on one side and the Quran on the other.
Yeah.
And he's tracing his finger across them, showing you that despite the different languages and eras, they rely on the exact same load-bearing walls. Individual liberty, blind justice, and limited government.
He notes that even the Constitution's separation of powers, the executive, legislative, and judicial branches, mirrors the checks and balances found in historical Islamic governance.
Really?
Yeah, you have the executive ruler, the independent judges, the Shura, or Congress of Representatives, and the independent scholars who hold all of them accountable to the divine law.
Applying all this, we finally arrive at his ultimate blueprint, the culmination of his entire thesis. He coins a brand new political framework that he calls Islamic Constitutionalism.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, this is where his abstract theory becomes a practical blueprint.
Okay.
He doesn't just list out rules, he establishes a strict moral hierarchy of concern. It flows downward. God first, then family, then community, and finally country at the bottom.
So he posits that if a society prioritizes the first three correctly, the country naturally heals itself without needing massive federal interventions.
Exactly. From that hierarchy, he extracts a governing philosophy that operates on several interconnected principles.
It starts with individualism, right? The recognition of the inherent God-given worth of every single human being.
Yes, and because of that worth, the society operates on a presumption of freedom. You don't have to ask the government for permission to live your life. Free agency is your natural state, provided you operate within ethical boundaries.
And that naturally necessitates limited government. In Islamic constitutionalism, the state exists solely to protect those inherent rights and preserve order. It is the servant of the people, not the master.
Which relies heavily on the concept of shura, meaning mutual consultation. The government can only operate through the consent of the governed. But because the government is so small, the slack has to be picked up by a robust civic society.
Right. Citizens can't just outsource their compassion or their neighborhood's upkeep to a federal bureaucracy. They have to actively enjoin what is good and forbid what is evil themselves.
It requires spontaneous, organic order built on mutual respect and the rule of law. No aristocracy, no special classes, and absolutely no mob justice.
So when you have all of those elements functioning, limited government, strict rule of law, and a highly engaged civic society, it naturally produces his next major pillar, a free market economy.
And ultimately, the synthesis of all these principles results in peace, not just a temporary ceasefire, but a natural, enduring harmony.
I really want to dig into that free market pillar because this is where his economic stance gets aggressive. He takes a very firm stance against socialism, which he essentially views as government theft and forced redistribution.
But he is equally hostile toward predatory corporate capitalism, which he sees as an unethical hijacking of the free market.
Wait, hold on. I'm trying to square this circle. He advocates for a totally free market, even proposing zero taxation on labor or property.
Correct.
But he hates predatory capitalism. An unrestrained market without taxes or massive regulations is the exact breeding ground for monopolies and corporate exploitation. How does this system not instantly devolve into a dystopian nightmare where corporations own everything?
That is the ultimate stress test of his theory, and it's where the Islamic part of Islamic constitutionalism does the heavy lifting.
Okay, how so?
In his framework, the market isn't restrained by thousands of pages of federal tax codes or bureaucratic red tape. It is restrained by the unyielding ethical boundaries inherent in Islamic law. The Sharia strictly prohibits predatory economic practices at the foundational level.
So things like usury charging interest are entirely off the table.
Usury is outlawed, which fundamentally changes how debt and banking operate. Price gouging on essential goods is forbidden.
Wow.
Hoarding monopolies are illegal. The law demands total transparency and mutual consent in all business dealings. Deception in trade invalidates a contract.
So the market is entirely free from government overreach and taxation, but it is deeply legally bound by a shared moral code that actively protects the vulnerable from being exploited by the powerful.
Exactly.
So what does this all mean when we zoom out and look at everything Halim Breiannis has put on the table? The diagnosis of a dying American empire, the rational proofs for a creator, the historical alignment of American liberty and Islamic law, and this radical new framework of Islamic constitutionalism.
It's a lot to take in.
It really is. The overarching takeaway for you, the listener, is the author's passionate argument that absolutely no political system, no set of brilliant laws, and no election cycle can save a nation if the people themselves are spiritually bankrupt.
According to the texts we've explored today, real lasting change doesn't happen in the halls of Washington.
It begins with personal responsibility. It begins with honoring God, strengthening the family unit, and actively, tangibly loving your neighbor.
It is a profound shift from relying on the mechanics of the state to relying on the condition of the soul.
It really is.
But this raises an important question, and it's a thought I want to leave you, the listener, to mull over long after this deep dive ends.
Let's hear it.
If the author is right, if true, enduring liberty requires a foundation of shared moral duty and a recognition of a divine creator. What happens to a highly diverse, highly secular society when it can no longer even agree on what that fundamental moral duty actually is?
That's a heavy question.
Can a nation survive on pure, sterile procedural law without a shared spiritual anchor? Or is a nation without a soul just a machine waiting to inevitably break down?
It's like trying to fix a broken car engine when everyone in the garage is holding a different manual, speaking a different language, and arguing over what a car is actually supposed to do in the first place.
Yeah, exactly.
Thank you for joining us on this incredibly deep intellectual journey. Keep questioning, keep exploring, and we'll see you on the next deep dive.